Hello and welcome to GlobalEye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The top global story today: explosions were heard in the central province of Isfahan in Iran, as per Iranian media. Iran's space agency spokesperson played down the incident and said that several drones had been successfully shot down. However, media reports cited US officials alleging that Israel carried out military operations in Iran. Reports also cited Iranian officials as saying that they have no plans of immediate retaliation. Amid the ongoing tensions, commercial flights are diverting their routes over western Iran, including Isfahan, and have been skirting Tehran to the north. Meanwhile, the US has vetoed a request by Palestine to the UN Security Council urging to make Palestine a full member of the body. The EU Commission President has urged Israel and Iran to refrain from escalation and says it is necessary that the region stays stable. European Union leaders have agreed to impose new sanctions against Iran's drone and missile producers following Tehran's drone attack against Israel. Meanwhile, Qatar has said that it is reassessing its role as a mediator between Israel and Hamas. The Qatari Prime Minister said that its efforts are being undermined by unnamed politicians seeking to score points. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency has said its campaign to end its operations in Gaza is ongoing. The chief of the UN agency warned Israel that there would be dire consequences if Israel tries to dismantle its humanitarian efforts. Let me now go across to Ambassador Akbaruddin, former permanent representative of India to the United Nations. Ambassador Akbaruddin, thank you very much for joining us on the program. What does this strike by Israel really signify? Iran was downplaying it. What are the big signals that you really pick up from Israel's intention here?
So first of all, Parikshit, thank you for having me on your show. Ordinarily, a strike of this sort would indicate that the shadow war is no longer in the shadows. Iran and Israel have been arch foes for close to 4 decades. Yet they had never attacked each other's territory from their own territories. So this is the first of a tit-for-tat escalation. That said, the reactions are quite reassuring, because neither has Israel acknowledged that it has attacked Iranian territory, nor has Iran played up this. So in some way, ordinarily, it should have taken up the escalatory ladder. But I would say that this strike is slightly different. It's a de-escalatory strike rather than one which has pushed up the escalatory ladder, because it's calibrated. It is not a full-blown strike like many were anticipating. It has not touched Israel's nuclear installations, although they are in that region. And by all accounts, it hasn't left any persons dead. Very similar to what has happened with the Iranian strikes which were much larger, but 99% were stopped in midair. So I would think that hopefully this will signal an end to this phase of the confrontation.
Right. Do you feel, Ambassador Akbaruddin, that Netanyahu, considering the weak political position he finds himself in, would be looking out to attack Iranian proxies in the days to come, looking to maybe escalate the situation in the Middle East?
So this has been a thinking among many scholars that Prime Minister Netanyahu would like to expand the conflict that is happening initially between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza to a broader framework, because it would then shift the focus on the difficulties of the Palestinians. That said, I think we will have to wait and watch rather than jump to conclusions about the intent of Israel, because it finds itself in a difficult position. Iran finds itself in a difficult position too. There is enormous pressure on both of them to restrain themselves. So we hope that this de-escalatory effort will pay dividends rather than lead to a further escalation.
Right. Tell us about the kind of country we are dealing with in Iran right now, especially its military powers at this stage. What Iran said, an Iranian expert said after their 300 missile or drone strike on Israel, that they managed this operation in a relatively low-cost manner. Most of the drones and missiles were very low cost. They were cheap, and it's only a few $1 million that Iran actually spent on that operation compared to billions of dollars that the West and Israel may have actually spent. So in case there is an escalation, what does Iran really have with it in order to hit back, and which can cause damage to the entire region?
So ordinarily, by all conventional assessments of military power, Israel and its allies would find themselves in a much stronger position than Iran is. Having said that, in the recent past, we've seen that the Iranian expertise, especially on drone technology, has exponentially improved. There are reports of these being used in Ukraine too, repeatedly. Again, while drones are only one aspect of technology, they are slow-moving. If they have to be launched from Iran to Israel, there is ample scope for them to be shot down during their movement from where they are launched to Israel. The challenge actually is whether Iranian proxies, who Iran calls the axis of resistance, which basically means Hamas, some of these militias in Syria, Iraq, the Houthis, and Hamas are going to use these technologies in back to square A of proxy attacks. And given that the distance is smaller in those, and if there are ballistic missiles or other missiles used from Hezbollah, that could have a much more damaging impact. But by all conventional parameters of military power, Israel dominates.
Right. Ambassador Akbaruddin, the US is imposing new sanctions on Iranian leaders, Iranian defense manufacturers, and also on the Iranian foreign minister. The G7 is also imposing sanctions. What could be Iran's retaliation to that effect? And do you think these sanctions will deter Iran?
So sanctions
is it a wise move at all, is what I'd like to ask you.
Yeah. So sanctions have been a favorite diplomatic weapon of the US for a long time. But as you raise the number of sanctions, the scope for further increase has decreased. So Iran already has been sanctioned on very many occasions. It has many of its officials under sanctions. It has not changed their approach. And so these sanctions are rather limited in nature because there is no further choice available to the US, having used all its diplomatic weaponry of sanctions previously. I don't think that it's going to change significantly any Iranian thinking on this. So it's more a public diplomacy tool of showing dissatisfaction, signaling discontent with the Iranian people, Iranian personnel in charge, or the institutions, rather than having a significant impact on Iran's approach to the issues in the Middle East, which have bedeviled the current conflict.
Right. I would also like to ask you about where India finds itself. Is this going to be a tough balancing act as we further see the conflict going on? There is no respite that we see at this juncture. We don't see Netanyahu and Israel pulling back from their military confrontation in Gaza. Will it be difficult for India to balance relations between the two countries, Iran and Israel?
So you're right. India has for several years been successfully able to straddle this divide between Israel and the Arabs or the Palestinians, and Israel and Iran. And it's one of the success stories of Indian diplomacy that we have maintained cordial relations, in fact, excellent relations with all the parties there. Having said that, any escalation puts pressure on India to make choices, sometimes difficult choices. So we won't be in a happy situation if this escalates. Besides, there are a large number of Indians in the Gulf. Should there be an escalation with open conflict across the Gulf, there will be a major impact on the Indian population. There are we get our petroleum from that region. So there could be adverse impacts on petroleum, right? Because the usual problem is whenever there is a conflict in the Gulf, the tankers become an easy target and petroleum flows become a challenge. So for all these reasons, India finds itself in a situation that it would desire not to be in, given that this is a region where we have excellent ties, but also very important interests, both in terms of human interests, but also strategic interests for petroleum.
Right. Ambassador Akbaruddin, it was a pleasure having you on the program. Definitely a critical balancing act for India. But as you said, the muted response that we've seen from Iran, downplaying the attack by Israel, and Israel carrying out a very limited operation, gives us some hope that both sides don't want to escalate this conflict anymore. And we are on the road to de-escalation as far as the crisis goes. Thank you once again for being with us on the program. We're heading into a short break, but coming up, we discuss the possibility of Iran's retaliation and if the Israel-Iran conflict becomes a full-fledged war, a discussion with Israeli journalist Ben-Dror Yemini when we return. Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. We're still discussing Israel-Iran tensions, and with us right now is Israeli author and journalist Ben-Dror Yemini. Ben, thank you very much for joining us. Israel has not reacted formally to the strikes that have taken place. It was a very limited operation. Could there be more?
I don't know. I'm not sure that even the Israeli leaders know exactly what is going to be the next step. We just don't know because, it depends on many factors that are not predicted right now. We have to wait and see. But generally speaking, you cannot compare really between Iran and Israel. I mean, Israel is not threatening Iran. We have nothing against Iran. It's Iran. It's the only one state in the world that is declaring once and again that they want to exterminate Israel. I mean, it's a scandal. So there is not any kind of comparison. You cannot compare a state that is declaring extermination with a state that is only defending itself against this kind of terror state.
Ben, is Netanyahu likely to escalate the situation further in the Middle East? Is Israel looking at some sort of a direct confrontation with Iran? Or does Netanyahu not want a situation like that?
No, I don't think Israel is not willing to any kind of escalation. We don't need it. We don't want it. In the first place, Israel did not want it. Israel did not open the war in the Gaza Strip. It was the attack, the brutal attack of the Hamas, which is a proxy of Iran, as we know. So they are actually initiating again, once and again, wars against Israel. From the Gaza Strip by the Hamas, from Yemen by the Houthis, from Lebanon by the Hezbollah. And we have to bear in mind, wherever you have Iran and the proxies of Iran, you have destruction and bloodshed, nothing to do with Israel. This is the story of the global jihad, and this is the story of Iran. So Israel is doing only one thing. Israel is in the front of the confrontation against Iran and against terror and against the global jihad.
Right. Ben, thank you so much for joining us on the program with your perspective. And we really hope that situations de-escalate across the Middle East and also in Gaza. Shifting focus to elections in India, the world's largest democracy, voting has begun.